Welcome to What You Don't Know You Don't Know, the podcast that dives headfirst into the surprising, the overlooked, and the misunderstood. Hosted by a curious duo and one man, one woman, we explore the world's most fascinating ideas hiding in plain sight. From science and religion to politics, psychology, history, and everything in between, we shine a light on the knowledge that's publicly available but rarely discussed. Each episode is a deep but never dull conversation that challenges assumptions, sparks new perspectives, and reveals just how much more there is to know, especially about the things you didn't even know you were missing. Whether you're a skeptic, a seeker, or just someone who loves good conversation, this show will leave you thinking, questioning, and most importantly, knowing.
Imagine this for a second. The very government that's supposed to protect your rights is secretly watching you, trying to shut you down.
Yeah, trying to neutralize you, really.
Exactly. Just because of your political beliefs, not because you did anything illegal, but just because they don't like what you stand for. People whispered about this stuff for years, right? Suspicions, gut feelings, but, proving it seemed impossible.
It's a really chilling idea, honestly. And it raises some huge questions, doesn't it? About government power versus, our basic civil liberties.
That hidden history, that's what we're diving into today.
Right.
We're focusing on COINTELPRO. That was the FBI's counterintelligence program. We've sifted through a whole pile of documents you sent over, official reports, history books, newer articles too, trying to get a real handle on this really complex and, let's face it, controversial time in U.S. history.
And those sources, they're just invaluable. They don't just give you the facts about these covert operations. They also show the struggle, the fight for transparency that's been going on.
Yeah, good point. So our mission here is to kind of cut through all that noise, pull out the really key stuff from these sources. What was COINTELPRO? Who did it target? Because the list is long. How did they operate? How did it finally get exposed? And maybe most importantly, why does this history still matter so much today?
Okay, let's get into it.
Let's dig in.
All right, so first things first. What actually was COINTELPRO? Looking at the reports, the histories, it's defined as basically a series of covert projects, and we have to stress this, illegal projects run by the FBI.
Illegal, yeah.
Mostly between 1956 and 1971. That's the official window.
Right, but the FBI's official line, you see it in things like that Senate report, was always, we're protecting national security, preventing violence, keeping the social order. But what really came out later, what these sources really hammer home, is that this program was designed to actively surveil people, yes, but also infiltrate groups, discredit them, disrupt them. Any American political group the FBI just decided was subversive. It went way beyond just watching.
And that timeline thing is interesting, too. 56 to 71, that's the official story. But the sources, they kind of suggest these sorts of operations, maybe more ad hoc, were happening even before 56.
Okay.
And kind of disturbingly, a lot of the same tactics seem to have just continued, maybe under different program names. Even after COINTELPRO officially shut down in 71, it wasn't like flipping a switch off.
No clean break. And the net they cast, who they called subversive.
Wow. It was incredibly wide, wasn't it? Not just one type of group.
Not at all. The documents show this huge variety of targets. Okay, yes, there was a big focus on the new left, the emerging social movements of the time.
Yeah.
But they really targeted groups all over the map. Civil rights groups, Black Power movements, think SCLC, the Black Panther Party.
People like Martin Luther King Jr., obviously, members of the Panthers.
Absolutely. But also anti-Vietnam War organizers, feminist groups, environmentalists, believe it or not, Native American rights groups like AIM.
AIM. Chicana groups like the Brown Berets, United Farm Workers, independence movements like the Young Lords and Puerto Rican communities. And interestingly, they also targeted white supremacist groups like the KKK.
So it wasn't just left-leaning groups then?
No. It really shows the target was anyone the FBI saw as like a serious challenge to how things were, to the status quo at that time.
Let's zoom in on some of the specific people and examples in the sources, because that's where you really see the human cost. Martin Luther King Jr. is, a huge one.
Definitely. After the March on Washington in '63, J. Edgar Hoover apparently said privately that King was the most dangerous Negro of the future in this nation.
Wow.
Most dangerous.
That label alone tells you a lot. And it wasn't just talk. The reports lay out how they systematically bugged his home, his hotel rooms. And then there was that infamous anonymous package they sent him, the so-called suicide package.
Right. In November '64, just as he's getting the Nobel Peace Prize. Terrible timing. It supposedly had audio tapes on the bugs and this letter, just vicious stuff, calling him filthy, abnormal, fraudulent, and hinting there was only one way out.
King thought they were trying to push him to kill himself before he accepted the prize.
That was his interpretation. Later on, especially with the Church Committee findings in the 70s, and then more documents came out uncensored in 2014. It seems pretty clear the main goal wasn't actually suicide, but more like driving him out of the civil rights leadership altogether.
So, psychological destruction.
Yeah, that seems to be the aim, based on what the sources suggest. Break him mentally, ruin his reputation.
And Malcolm X, also a target.
Another major one. Now, the FBI always denied any direct hand in his murder, but the documents, they show the FBI actively worked to, quote, widen the rift between Malcolm X and Elijah Muhammad. They used infiltrators, spread rumors, tactics that definitely contributed to that super tense atmosphere just before he was assassinated.
Creating the conditions, maybe.
You could argue that. Then the Black Panther Party became a huge focus, especially starting around '69. Their leaders were explicitly marked for, quote, neutralization.
Which could mean
Anything, really. Assassination, prison, public humiliation, being framed on false charges. The sources name people like Fred Hampton, Assata Shakur, Geronimo Pratt, Mumia Abu-Jamal, and the tactics used against them included perjury, harassing witnesses, even hiding evidence that could have cleared them.
And it wasn't just the leaders, right?
No, not at all. Even people who just supported the groups financially, like the actress Jean Steenberg. She gave money to the Black Panthers.
Uh-huh.
And there was this FBI plan to leak news about her pregnancy, specifically hoping it would cause her, quote, embarrassment or tarnish her image, just for donating.
That's incredibly petty and cruel, Muhammad Ali, too.
Yeah, he drew their attention, mainly because he joined the Nation of Islam and was so outspoken against the Vietnam War.
Okay. And the story of Viola Liuzzo, that one is just horrifying.
It really is one of the most shocking. She was a white civil rights worker, a mother from Detroit who came down for the Selma marches, murdered by Klansmen right after.
And the FBI connection.
Appallingly, one of the Klansmen in the car that shot her, Gary Thomas Rowe, was a paid, longtime FBI informant. And the sources show he was also mixed up in other violence attacks on freedom riders, maybe even the Birmingham church bombing.
So an informant was involved in her murder and the FBI's response.
Instead of just focusing on getting justice for her, the FBI, with Hoover personally involved, launched this smear campaign against Liuzzo after she was dead.
Against the victim.
Yes. Hoover told President Johnson false stories, that she was on drugs, that she was having affairs with black activists in the car, that she had abandoned her kids, all stuff disproven later, the sources note, by her autopsy and just basic facts. But they deliberately tried to destroy her reputation.
That level of malice, it's hard to comprehend.
It shows how far they'd go. And the targeting wasn't always surgical either. Groups like the SCLC, known for nonviolence, sometimes got slapped with these broad, nasty labels like Black Nationalist Hate Group. Why? Probably just because they were effective organizers.
So being effective was being dangerous.
Seems like it. And it wasn't just groups. Individual writers, whole student organizations. The net was cast very wide.
Okay, so that's who they targeted. Let's talk about how. What were the actual methods used to disrupt and neutralize these people and groups?
Well, the sources paint a pretty clear picture. There's a framework people often use from Brian Glick that lays out 5 main methods. It's helpful.
What are they?
Infiltration, psychological warfare, harassment through the legal system, illegal force, and undermining public opinion.
Okay.
And what really stands out is how these weren't separate things. They all work together, reinforcing each other.
Let's break those down. Psychological warfare sounds kind of vague, but the examples are chilling. Those anonymous letters, right? Not just to someone like MLK.
Right. But also forged letters between groups. Like they'd write a fake letter, supposedly from the Black Panthers to U.S. organization, or vice versa, designed specifically to create suspicion, paranoia, maybe even provoke violence between them.
Wow. So manufacturing conflict.
Exactly. Spreading false rumors through the media, creating negative propaganda that looked like news reports or documentaries, as one about the Panthers, manipulating narratives. It was all about dividing groups from within and cutting them off from allies or public sympathy.
And infiltration, you mentioned agents inside groups. Their job wasn't just spying.
No. Often their main goal was disruption, stirring up trouble, exploiting fears that already existed, making tensions worse. sometimes using tactics like bad jacketing.
What's that?
That's where they spread a false rumor that a perfectly legitimate activist was actually an FBI informant or a police spy.
Oh, to get their own group to turn on them?
Precisely. Which could get that person isolated, expelled, or even physically attacked by their own comrades. It was incredibly destructive.
Then there's legal harassment, abusing the justice system itself.
Blatantly. The sources document cases of FBI agents committing perjury, lying under oath, fabricating evidence to get people arrested, convicted wrongly.
Like the Geronimo Pratt case.
That's a really stark example. He was a Black Panther leader. Sources mention an FBI agent later testified that both he and the LAPD knew Pratt wasn't even at the crime scene he was convicted for. They framed him.
Unbelievable.
Other tactics included discriminatory enforcement of laws, just constantly hassling people, very visible surveillance to intimidate, dragging activists before grand juries just to disrupt their lives and scare others.
And then illegal force. This goes beyond harassment.
Yes. This often involved the FBI working with local police departments, coordinating violent raids on activists' homes or offices. And sometimes, tragically, people died.
Fred Hampton.
The Fred Hampton case is probably the most notorious example. He was a young, charismatic Black Panther leader in Chicago. An FBI informant, William O'Neill, reportedly gave the FBI a detailed floor plan of Hampton's apartment. And sources indicate O'Neill might have even drugged Hampton the night before the police raid. During that raid, police stormed in, and Hampton was shot and killed in his bed. His pregnant fiancée was there, too.
So the FBI provided the intel, the setup.
The intel, the floor plan, leading directly to his death. This wasn't just about breaking into offices anymore, those black bag jobs, the warrantless entries. This was coordinated action leading to violence and death.
And the last one, undermining public opinion.
That kind of tied it all together, making it hard for leaders to get media coverage or making sure the coverage was negative, creating this atmosphere of distrust around the targeted groups so even their legitimate grievances were dismissed, using friendly media contacts to plant negative stories.
Hoover's directive about the Black Panthers really says it all, doesn't it?
Its chillingly blunt purpose is to disrupt the Black Panther Party, and it is immaterial whether facts exist to substantiate the charge. Disruption was the goal. Not truth, not justice, not even national security the way most people think of it, just disruption.
And a big part of that disruption was this divide and conquer strategy.
The documents show explicit campaigns to drive wedges between different groups. They were worried about unity, especially across racial lines.
Like Fred Hampton's Rainbow Coalition. Trying to bring together Panthers, Latino groups, poor white groups.
Exactly. That was seen as a major threat by the FBI. And these divide and conquer tactics, the forged letters, the rumors, they directly led to violence, even murders, between some of these groups who should have been allies.
It really paints a picture of this relentless, comprehensive campaign to just dismantle movements. From the inside and the outside.
It's pretty staggering when you see it all laid out.
So, given how secret and illegal all this was, how did we, the public, finally find out about COINTELPRO?
Well, the first crack in the dam came from a really bold act of civil disobedience, March 1971. A group called the Citizens Commission to Investigate the FBI broke into an FBI field office in Media, Pennsylvania.
They just broke in.
And they took whole file cabinets full of documents. These were the first pieces of hard evidence that proved COINTELPRO existed and showed what kind of tactics they were using.
That takes guts.
Incredible guts. And the timing they picked, the night of the first Muhammad Ali versus Joe Frazier fight, the fight of the century.
Figuring everyone, police included, would be distracted.
That seems to have been the idea. Genius, really.
So they get these documents. Then what?
They started leaking them to journalists. Now, a lot of newspapers were scared to publish them, potential prosecution, But the Washington Post, to their credit, decided to go ahead. They published the documents, even with the Attorney General telling them not to.
That was huge.
It really blew the lid off. After that, more information started trickling out, partly through lawsuits. An NBC reporter named Carl Stern used the Freedom of Information Act effectively, and the Socialist Workers' Party filed a big lawsuit that uncovered a lot, too. All this pressure built up.
Leading to the Church Committee, 1976, the big Senate investigation.
Exactly. The Select Committee to Study Governmental Operations with Respect to Intelligence Activities, chaired by Senator Frank Church.
And the timing was right for that, politically.
The country was still processing Watergate. And then came revelations about the CIA doing its own domestic spying, the program called the Family Jewels. People were angry and demanded answers about government overreach.
President Ford tried to head it off first, didn't he? with the Rockefeller Commission.
He did. But the sources point out, Ford himself admitted that commission was kind of limited, designed to avoid the really explosive stuff, like potential assassination plots by intelligence agencies, which, of course, just made people demand a real, thorough investigation even more.
So the Church Committee gets formed, but getting the information they needed, the sources say that was a real fight.
A huge battle. The documents detailed just how much resistance they ran into, a lot of it coming straight from the White House. Figures like Dick Cheney, who was in the Ford administration then, played a big part in managing or maybe controlling the flow of information. Well, the strategy seemed to be, look like you're cooperating, but use national security as a shield to hold back anything really damaging. The White House had to approve document requests. Cheney apparently had a role in deciding what the committee actually got to see. Even stuff that was approved had to go through the White House first.
So bottlenecks and gatekeepers.
Pretty much. And the agencies themselves, they put up walls, tried to keep investigators away from the most sensitive files. Lots of requests were just flat-out denied details on covert ops, key internal reports like the Colby report on CIA misdeeds, the full family jewels files, even budget reports from the OMB about intelligence spending. They were denied over half the special studies they asked for.
So how did the committee get any information?
Sometimes they were just given limited briefings. Sometimes they were allowed to look at documents, but only at the agency headquarters. Couldn't take notes, couldn't take copies. Someone described it as just fondling files.
Fondling files, wow.
Yeah. Or they'd get heavily redacted documents, sanitized versions, or these classified abstract summaries designed to give the idea of cooperation without actually revealing the juicy details.
Why all the secrecy? What were they so afraid of?
Well, the official line was protecting sources and methods, national security. But the sources suggest deeper worries, too. Concerns about crippling the agencies. Operatives being afraid of lawsuits or reprisal if their actions came out heads on the block, as one memo put it, and frankly, damaging the image of the U.S. intelligence community, which they felt needed to be cloaked in mystery and held in awe.
Keeping up appearances.
Right. There was even this whole legal back and forth about whether Congress even had the power to release classified info if they wanted to. The CIA's own lawyer concluded Congress didn't have explicit legal authority, but they were also constitutionally immunized, meaning they probably couldn't be prosecuted if they did release it. Shows you the tension.
And you get glimpses of the mindset, right? Like Kissinger's reaction.
Oh, yeah. The sources mention Henry Kissinger reacting furiously when CIA Director William Colby testified frankly about assassination plots. Kissinger apparently called it an act of insanity and national humiliation, to even suggest having a law stopping the president from ordering an assassination.
That really reveals a certain worldview about executive power and secrecy.
It certainly does. Intense resistance to oversight.
So after fighting through all that resistance, what did the Church Committee actually find? What did their final report say about COINTELPRO and all this domestic spying?
Their conclusions were absolutely scathing, unequivocal. They found that these domestic intelligence programs, COINTELPRO included, routinely broke the law and violated Americans' constitutional rights. Plain and simple.
No ambiguity there.
None. They found a deep-seated disregard for legality inside the FBI. Major failures of oversight by top officials. They used terms like unsavory, harmful, and vicious tactics, called them intolerable in democratic society. They explicitly said these tactics serve political goals, not real national security.
Right.
And that the whole system of checks and balances, congressional oversight, executive control, it had fundamentally failed. They connected COINTELPRO directly back to decades of earlier FBI political surveillance and repression.
So it wasn't just a rogue operation, it was systemic, aimed at crushing dissent based on what? Fear of dangerous ideas.
That's pretty much it. Preventing citizens from using their First Amendment rights speech association because the FBI didn't like their politics.
Okay, so COINTELPRO officially ends in 71. The Church Committee exposes a lot of this in 76. But did the tactics really stop? Or did they just, change shape?
That's the big question the sources raise. Officially, COINTELPRO was done. But did the domestic spying stop? The evidence suggests maybe not entirely.
Like what?
Well, there's documentation cited showing warrantless wiretaps, illegal mail opening continuing after 71 to 72, 73, 74.
So the practices lingered.
And critics argue and point to evidence in these sources that tactics like COINTELPRO popped up again later, targeting different groups. SpEpisode-2, the Committee in Solidarity with the People of El Salvador in the 80s, later versions of AIM, environmental groups like Earth First, the anti-globalization movement in the late 90s, early 2000s.
Even individuals.
Yeah, people like the journalist David Halberstam were apparently tracked for decades after his critical Vietnam reporting.
And the sources mention more recent examples too, right? Things that feel eerily familiar.
Definitely. Some critics pointed to counterterrorism guidelines brought in under Reagan, saying they basically opened the door back up to some of these tactics. You see cases where informants seem to play a really proactive, maybe even provocative role, like in the Eric McDavid case involving environmental activists. And the death of Filiberto Ojeda Rios, the Puerto Rican independence activist, killed by the FBI during an arrest attempt. A UN committee even called it an assassination, raises serious questions about use of force against political figures.
There's something about prison activists, too.
Yeah, lawsuits uncovered a program called PRIS Acts, which seemed to target prison activists using similar surveillance methods. And then, much more recently, 2018, claims surfaced backed up by internal FBI documents from late 2017, suggesting the FBI was surveilling the Black Lives Matter movement.
Okay.
And they created this category, Black Identity Extremists, or BI. Critics immediately said, wait a minute, this sounds exactly like COINTELPRO targeting black movements back in the 60s.
The parallels are hard to ignore.
And other findings since around 2010 suggest the FBI has spent disproportionate resources spying on peaceful, often left-leaning groups. Occupy Wall Street, racial justice activists, environmentalists, groups opposing ICE, anti-war protesters.
Occupy movement specifically.
Yeah, documents obtained through FOIA show the FBI was monitoring Occupy from the very beginning, collecting info on people just exercising free speech, sharing that info widely, even with private security firms, banks, local police, blurring that line between investigating crime and just monitoring political dissent.
And that Michigan example you mentioned earlier,
Yeah.
questioning a staffer about a Zoom call?
Yeah, that was 2020. An FBI task force questioning a state senator staffer about a private Zoom call discussing a draft bill about tear gas use. I mean, that's incredibly recent. And it raises those same core concerns. Is government surveillance chilling political debate and action?
It's not just the FBI either. The Church Committee looked at the NSA too, didn't they?
They did. Found the NSA was doing domestic surveillance too. Programs like Shamrock basically getting telegraph companies to hand over Americans' communications for decades.
Wow.
They found the NSA put James Earl Ray, MLK's convicted killer, on a watch list before any warrant existed. They highlighted the Houston plan under Nixon that was a plan for massive domestic spying, burglaries, mail opening, and a program called Minaret, where the NSA specifically targeted communications of anti-war leaders, civil rights activists, Black Power figures.
And concerns about NSA surveillance haven't exactly gone away.
Not at all.
Yeah.
We had the rumors about Echelon in the late 90s, monitoring global communications, ongoing fights over getting information from the NSA. The questions the Church Committee raised about how you oversee these incredibly powerful, technologically advanced agencies, they're still very relevant. There was even a report in 1999 looking at the NSA's authority for domestic spying, and it was basically inconclusive, found no explicit law allowing it, but said FISA, the Foreign Intelligence Surveillance Act, appears to anticipate it, leaves this huge gray area.
So wrapping up this deep dive then, what COINTELPRO really shows us based on these sources is this dark chapter where the U.S. government actively tried to destroy domestic political movements. Using illegal, unethical methods gets a whole range of groups and people.
Yeah, and the big takeaway for me is that this wasn't just watching people. It was active destruction. Psychological warfare, messing with the legal system, actual physical force, and exposing it. That was a massive struggle, as the Church Committee's experience shows. It really highlights that constant fight between government claims of national security and protecting our basic civil liberties.
Right, and these sources make it pretty clear, this whole debate about government spying domestically, how it affects free speech, free association, it's not just history.
Not at all. The claims we've discussed, the documents showing similar tactics potentially continuing or popping up again against different groups in recent years, they keep these questions alive and urgent for us today.
So thinking about today, with the incredible technology intelligence agencies have now, way beyond what Hoover had, and given this history of secrecy and resistance to oversight we've talked about, what level of vigilance do you think is needed now to make sure government surveillance actually respects our rights?
And maybe more importantly, what role can citizens, can you play in keeping that balance, that delicate, essential balance between security and liberty? That's definitely something worth chewing on as you continue your own deep dives into the world around us.
Well, that's a wrap. Hope you liked the episode. Don't miss out on new episodes of You Don't Know, You Don't Know. New episodes every week. Like and subscribe.